Chapter 1923. Qi Li was speechless. He felt that if this continued, Dark Star's reputation as the most violent sorcerer in the server would spread. She would definitely be known as the most sharp-tongued person in the server. Gu Shengyin received another private message. It was from Tang Sect Pig. Sister Dark Fragrance, take a look at the World Channel. Gu Shengyin clicked on it, and the smile on her face disappeared. Qi Li saw that her expression wasn't good, so he also clicked on the World Channel. Enchanting Beauty was scolding people in the World Channel with her group of brainless fans. Enchanting Beauty, Dark Fragrance, you bitch. If you have the ability, let's face each other face to face. Why are you secretly ruining my reputation? I love Enchanting Beauty, that's right. Dark Fragrance is shameless. She's secretly sowing discord between us and Iron Blood. Enchanting Support Group, Dark Fragrance is shameless. Dark Fragrance is shameless. Dark Fragrance is shameless. Dark Fragrance is shameless. Bao Bao wants kiss kiss. Dark Fragrance is shameless. Dark Fragrance is shameless. Dark Fragrance is shameless. The back was completely flooded. These people are too much. Qi Li's expression was very ugly. Qi Li, some people shouldn't forget what education is just because they're on the internet. Gu Shengyin just happened to see this message. She turned around and looked at Qi Li helplessly. Why are you arguing with them? Qi Li said coldly, are you going to let them scold me? Gu Shengyin shook her head. Watch me. She bought a golden horn. To be honest, her heart ached when she bought it. She said to the golden horn, Enchanting Beauty, I, Dark Fragrance, will fight you in the open. Do you dare to come in half an hour? Enchanting Beauty, I, Dark Fragrance, will fight you in the open. Do you dare to come in half an hour? Enchanting Beauty, I, Dark Fragrance, will fight you in the open. Do you dare to come in half an hour? Enchanting Beauty, I, Dark Fragrance, will fight you in the open. Do you dare to come in half an hour? A cold female voice sounded over the entire server. The World Channel was silent. Fuxing Yiming Wuxin. Ha, the world is finally quiet. If you ask me, Master Hidden Fragrance, your face slapping came too quickly. Fuxing Yiming Wuxin. I said exceptional beauty and her lackeys, you guys slandered her for playing dirty. Now Hidden Fragrance is doing as you wish. Do you dare to respond to such an enchanting beauty? Hidden Fragrance leaves. Wuxin, don't scare her. Everyone knows that she's a fragile mage. She's only good at talking. Will I eat melon? I like this kind of reversal. Stunning Enchanting looked at the World Channel and heard Dark Fragrance's words just now. She was so angry that she was trembling. However, Gu Shengyin was right. She did not dare to accept the challenge. In the current Sound of Dragon's Roar server, who didn't know that although Dark Fragrance Leaves was a mage, her battle prowess was extremely abnormal? If she agreed to it, it would really be embarrassing. What she didn't know was that regardless of whether she agreed or not, Gu Shengyin did not plan on letting her go. Gu Shengyin said to the system, System, can you find some information about Stunning Enchanting's private life? Especially about her and her boyfriend. After all, last time, Gu Shengyin saw Stunning Enchanting and another strange man enter the residential area. The system replied, yes. Gu Shengyin nodded. When the time comes, find it and let me see. I'm going to give Iron Blood a gift. She could clearly see that Iron Blood was a man who cared about face the most. Stunning Enchanting had made him lose face, and the two of them had such an ambiguous relationship. If Iron Blood found out, Stunning Enchanting would have almost made herself a cuckold. Okay, host. Gu Shengyin casually glanced over and her eyes widened. Holy shit. She thought that this was just a simple threesome. She never thought that Stunning Enchanting would have such a rich love history. Please allow her to feel sorry for Iron Blood for a second. There were also the male players who thought of Stunning Enchanting as a goddess. They were actually so blind. She wondered what kind of reaction they would have when they saw the real Stunning Enchanting. Chapter 1924. Gu Shengyin didn't waste any time and had the system send an anonymous email to Iron Blood. For some things, it was best not to dirty one's hands if one could avoid dirtying one's hands. Ironblood was leading Ironblood Lofty Sentiment's elite team to clear an elite instance dungeon. Looking at the items dropped, his mood improved a lot. At this time, the game system notified him that he had received an anonymous email. Ironblood was puzzled. He returned to the guild and opened it. In less than 2 minutes, his face was ashen. Stunning enchanting. The character's face in the game didn't change, but Ironblood's cold tone couldn't be concealed. When he thought of how he was so obedient and submissive to that woman a few days ago, Ironblood couldn't control the anger in his heart. It was too disgusting. He expressionlessly stored all the information in his hollow brain, not saying anything. After Stunning Enchanting left Ironblood Lofty Sentiments, her life wasn't bad. She soon joined another guild that was ranked higher than Ironblood Lofty Sentiments. With her personality and appearance, she was doing very well. Occasionally, there would be posts about Stunning Enchanting on the forums. The general idea was that she was close to someone. When Ironblood Lofty Sentiments saw those posts, they just shook their heads and sneered. Now wasn't the time. More than a month passed. Stunning Enchanting seemed to have established a relationship with the vice president of the guild. The vice president, who looked good and had a good family background, seemed to really like Stunning Enchanting. Not only did he buy all kinds of fireworks in the game to announce that the two were officially together, he even posted a message on the forums asking for blessings. Gu Shengyi naturally saw that post. The front page of the post was a picture of Stunning Enchanting and that man snuggling together. They were really in love. She silently calculated. At this time, Ironblood should make a move, right? If Ironblood didn't make a move at this time, she would have to do it herself. However, Ironblood's thoughts were obviously similar to Gu Shengyi's. After seeing the high-profile post showing off their love, he laughed coldly. Bitch, I'll let you know what retribution is. The popularity of the PDA post hasn't gone down yet. The appearance of another post directly made the entire Huanma forum explode. It was a skinning post. Moreover, it was quite thorough, and the target was Stunning Enchanting, who was quite famous in the Sound of Dragon Roar server. The title of the post was, Exposing the Most Despicable and Disgusting Female Player in the Fantasy Magic Game. There wasn't a single word of nonsense in the post. From the very beginning, it directly exposed a series of private information such as Stunning Beauty's real name, age, personal photo, and so on. Then, the real revelations began. From the moment she entered the game and hooked up with the first male player until now, there was a timeline as proof. Along the way, all in all, it could be summed up in one sentence. The Stunning Beauty had never seriously dated a man before. She was dating at least 2 men at the same time during these 2 events. For example, right after she established her relationship with the vice president in the game, the post revealed that she had a boyfriend who had been in love with her for nearly 2 years in real life. That man even bought her a house. This was not the end. Under the premise that she had a boyfriend online and in real life, she actually maintained long-term contact with a married man. Chapter 1925. Not only was she two-timing, she was also a mistress that everyone wanted to beat up. Even her die-hard fans couldn't refute her in the comments section. Not only was the timeline of the post clear and organized, but there were also photos of all the beautiful and enchanting lovers that had been secretly taken. Alright, there were also hotel records. It was an ironclad fact. This post was much more explosive than the previous post about how they were fighting and loving each other. How many players were there in the entire Huanma? The players didn't know. What they saw was that under this post, in less than half an hour, it had accumulated more than 4,000 comments. This wasn't the end. Almost as soon as it was refreshed, the popularity of the whole post was rising at an extremely terrifying speed. When Stunning Enchanting received the private message from the man, she was dumbfounded. The vice president didn't ask any real or fake questions. After scolding her in a private message, he directly blacklisted her. At the same time, the post in the forum that was full of public displays of affection was directly deleted. How much the vice president liked Stunning Enchanting before was how angry and disgusted he was now. He actually took a fancy to such a woman. At first, Stunning Enchanting didn't know anything. After being scolded for no reason, she was furious. But at the same time, she was very uneasy. She felt that something had happened that she couldn't control. Her premonitions soon became true. After she saw the chat records on the World Channel, she finally knew that something big seemed to have happened on the forum. Stunning Enchanting breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. In her heart, being scolded on the forum was a normal thing. It wasn't a big deal. She casually clicked in to take a look. Her whole body froze. Slowly scrolling down, her face began to turn pale. Then her whole hand began to tremble. Who was it? There were some things in here, some people she had almost forgotten. Who was it that dared to reveal everything about him, no matter how big or small? Stunning Enchanting only felt that in an instant, all the strength in her body was sucked out. She finally understood why that man had such a reaction. A special notification sound rang out. Stunning Enchanting was stunned and logged out of the game. Her phone was ringing. It was her current boyfriend. "Hello, darling." She calmed herself down and called sweetly. The man on the other end said something, and her expression suddenly became flustered. "No, listen to me. It's all fake. Someone is deliberately slandering me. The one I love is you." The man on the other side seemed to be cursing loudly. The stunning and enchanting woman hung up the phone in a daze. It's over, it's really over this time. Illusion demons were too common. Although her boyfriend didn't play this game, many of his friends and family did. He had taken her to meet his parents. When they saw the posts on the forum, they naturally recognized her immediately. As long as one was not a fool, one would be able to determine whether the information on the paper was real or fake. The stunning and enchanting woman sat on the floor in a daze. After a while, her phone rang again. It was her boyfriend. A look of joy appeared on the beautiful woman's face. However, the other party only coldly told her to pack her things and get out of the house within 3 days. Chapter 1926. Only then did Exceptional Seductive remember something. This house was indeed bought by her boyfriend especially for her. When he bought it, he said that he would put the house under her name. But what did she say at that time? She loved him and was not with him for his money. In order to prove this, she was determined not to take the house. What she was interested in at that time was not a mere house, but her boyfriend's famous family background. What she wanted came true. Her boyfriend thought that she was the most pure and unworldly woman he had ever met in his life and treated her even better. If she could have thought of this day, she would never have said those words to capture her boyfriend's heart. This was a high-class apartment in Shanghai City. Now, her boyfriend was gone, and even the house was gone. She was about to be kicked out. Exceptional Seductive tried to call him one last time to explain, but the cold, busy tone came from the other end of the phone. He blacklisted her. Exceptional Seductive finally lost her last breath and her whole body went limp. The players soon discovered that Exceptional Seductive, who was once quite active, could no longer be seen in this game. Exceptional Seductive really could not stay in this server anymore. Her ID and appearance were too eye-catching. No matter where she appeared, there would be teasing from male players and ridiculing from female players. Seductive beauty, I'll pay 10,000 crystal coins for a night. Are you willing to accompany me? Exceptional Seductive, how can a woman like you still have the face to appear in this game? Her supporters had all run away, and many players who didn't like her started to PK her the moment they saw her. She had lost dozens of levels in 2 days and most of her equipment had been lost. She really could not play anymore. Do you guys think that Exceptional Seductive really left this game? Gu Shengyin lazily listened to her teammates' gossip. Toe-scratching Hunk said, I don't know. Anyway, her reputation is completely ruined. Whether she will play or not, at least the ID Exceptional Seductive and that overly beautified face can never be used again. That's true, Luqin. A private message suddenly came. Gu Shengyin looked at Qi Li, who was standing beside him, in confusion. They were so close to each other, and there were no outsiders here. Why would they have a private chat? Qi Li looked at her with a gentle gaze. It's a good day in a few days. Can you accompany me to meet my parents? Gu Xingyin was stunned. She raised her head to look at the man in front of her. His face was calm, but his eyes were filled with a warm smile. Sure, she heard herself say with a smile. She and he didn't need to test each other so much anymore. She loved him, he loved her, they were together, a family. It was that simple. It was as if a beautiful dream had ended. Gu Xingyin opened his eyes and looked at the system that was floating in front of him. She felt the energy flowing into her body from the void, looked at the space in front of her, and exhaled. System, I plan to try walking around this space again. Although she vaguely felt that her current strength was not enough to conquer this space, she could not help but want to give it a try. The stronger she became, the stronger her perception of certain things in her heart. At the same time, she had a faint guess about the identity of her lover. Chapter 1927. System. Gu Xingyin called out to the system. Does the host have any questions? The system replied. Gu Xingyin looked at it and suddenly said, Tell me the truth, what is his identity? The system was speechless. Sorry, your authority is not enough, Gu Xingyin interrupted it. Don't play dumb, I know. There are some things that you can't say even if you know. How about this, I'll ask you a question, and you answer yes or no. Before the system could say anything, she added, if you can't answer, then you can remain silent, okay? At this point, the system didn't reject him anymore. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and asked, You and him are actually related, right? The system's body lit up and replied, Yes. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. His real identity is? The system did not say anything. Gu Xingyin said helplessly, All right, I'll change the question. Are all the worlds that I'm doing missions in real? The system's white light flashed a few times, probably thinking about whether it could answer this question. Gu Xingyin waited for a moment, and finally the system replied, They are real. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. A person who could make her do missions in 3,000 worlds at will, she wanted to ask more, but the system suddenly said, The host can't ask any more questions, please continue to do missions. Gu Xingyin was speechless. She said gloomily, That's not what we said in the beginning. However, the system did not give her a chance to continue asking. A familiar dizziness came over, and when Gu Xingyin opened her eyes again, she was already in a completely unfamiliar place. Gu Xingyin was speechless. She turned her head to look at the system and said gloomily, System, you said you'd let me ask. What answered her was the system's calm and emotionless voice. The host is ready to start transmitting mission information. Gu Xingyin was speechless. You can do it, system. Now you're pretending to be serious. Only then did Gu Xingyin remember that she had not tried to walk through the spatial rift. Forget it. She was a little discouraged and thought for a moment. Since she couldn't walk over on her own, she might as well complete a few more quests first. She closed her eyes and began to receive the information transmitted by the system. In this world, the original body's name was Zhang Jiujio. Her identity was considered to be the young lady of a small town. Of course, these so-called squires were only slightly better off than ordinary farmers. Their families barely had enough money to hire an old servant, and they could barely afford to work in the fields. Zhang Jiujio's father, Zhang Zhenxing, had never been to school. His daughter's name, which sounded very scholarly, was something he had spent a lot of money to get an old scholar in the county to come up with. Logically speaking, Zhang Jiujio was the only daughter in the family, and the Zhang family was considered a big family in this small town. She should not have to worry about food or clothing for the rest of her life. However, the problem lay in one place. When Zhang Jiujio was only 4 years old, her mother passed away. Her father, Zhang Zhenxing, was an honest man. He was afraid that his younger daughter would suffer if he married a stepwife, so he didn't remarry. If he didn't remarry, he would not have a son. Putting aside the future of the Zhang family's business, Zhang Zhenxing was more worried that when he grew old, his daughter, Zhang Jiujio, would have no one to rely on. If she was unfortunate enough to marry into an unkind family and got bullied, there would be no powerful relatives to support her. He thought for a while and came up with an idea. Chapter 1928. When Zhang Jiujie was 6 years old, Zhang Zhensheng personally went to the county town and carefully selected a boy from the slave trader. Logically speaking, such children were worthless, but Zhang Zhensheng had his eyes on the fairest and cleverest child in this batch of children. Zhang Zhensheng spent 2 taels of silver to buy Zhang Fei. 2 taels of silver was not a small sum for the Zhang family. It was enough to cover the expenses of the Zhang family for 1 or 2 months. Zhang Fei was the name Zhang Zhensheng had given to the boy. Zhang Zhensheng raised Zhang Fei as his own son and provided him with food and shelter like his own daughter. He had the old servant call him young master. When the neighbors saw this, they all knew that Master Zhang was making plans for his daughter. Indeed, Zhang Zhensheng had bought Zhang Fei for him to be his future son-in-law. He thought that since they had grown up together and the Zhang family had raised the child, Zhang Fei would not mistreat Zhang Jiujie in the future. He had even sent Zhang Fei to a private school and provided for him to study for more than 10 years. Zhang Fei was not stupid. Although the two sides had never explicitly said it, he knew that he was not a child of the Zhang family and what kind of status he had in the Zhang family. He wasn't really against it. Zhang Jiujie, who had been called little sister since she was young, was very charming. When she looked at people with her misty eyes, she could melt people's hearts. She did not look like a girl that could be raised in a small town. Zhang Fei was even a little happy to have such a beautiful fiancée. This was supposed to be a beautiful story of a kind country gentleman taking care of a poor student and marrying a beautiful wife after the student obtains scholarly honors. However, no one had expected the following development. Zhang Fei was a talented person, but his talent wasn't that famous among students all over the country. However, no one had expected that this young man, who did not look very talented, would smoothly pass the provincial examination, the metropolitan examination, and finally the court examination. Although he did not make it into the top 3, Zhang Fei was successfully selected as a grand scholar. This was a grand scholar. Not to mention the small town that the Zhang family was in, even in the entire county, there might not be a single grand scholar in the imperial examination every year, greatly bringing honor to the ancestors. Everyone said that the Zhang family had great luck in their previous life. They had casually bought a child and it turned out to be a grand scholar. Zhang Zhensheng was both surprised and happy. He felt that he had made the right move. In the future, Jiujie would be the wife of a grand scholar. Who knows, she might even be given a title. However, he didn't think about whether Zhang Fei would be willing to find a wife who couldn't help him in his career. Zhang Fei's heart was big. After he became a jinshi, he didn't rush back to his hometown. Instead, he took the money that the Zhang family gave him and stayed in the capital. After a month had passed, Zhang Zhensheng, who had been waiting bitterly, finally received a letter from the capital. The letter was personally written by Zhang Fei. It meant that the Mingyi Marquis had taken a liking to him while he was in the capital and wanted him to be his son-in-law. The Marquis power was old Marquis's power of the Marquis. What he meant was that his engagement with Zhang Jiujie had never been officially set in the first place. Now that things were like this, they could just pretend that nothing had happened. Chapter 1929. In any case, Zhang Zhensheng had lived for more than half his life and had some small businesses. Although he hadn't studied much, he was still very good at reading people's body language. Zhang Fei's letter was filled with a perfunctory tone. In other words, he was planning to stay in the capital and never come back. He was trying to distance himself from the Zhang clan completely. Zhang Zhensheng fainted on the spot from anger. Zhang Jiujie had always been spoiled by her father since she was young. She had developed an innocent personality and didn't know about the hardships of the world. When she found out that her father had fainted, she was frightened and sat by the bed crying. Fortunately, Zhang Zhensheng's body had always been good. He only fainted from anger and didn't have any major problems. He looked at his daughter with bitterness in his heart. Speaking of which, the only person who didn't know about the tacit engagement between Zhang Jiujie and Zhang Fei was Jiujie herself. Zhang Zhensheng liked to see his daughter's carefree appearance and didn't want these trivial matters to disturb her mind so early. Therefore, Zhang Jiujie didn't know about this matter at all. After coaxing his daughter, Zhang Zhensheng secretly sent people to the capital to inquire about the new Grand Scholar, Zhang Fei, and the Mingyi Marquis household. However, this investigation allowed the Marquis household in the capital to discover some clues. After a few questions, Zhang Fei had no choice but to tell them about his relationship with the Zhang family. The eldest young miss of the Mingyi Marquis household, Chen Mingzhu, who had taken a fancy to Zhang Fei, was a vicious person. She appeared gentle and considerate as she spoke words of understanding, earning Zhang Fei's endless gratitude. In the blink of an eye, she found a few loyal servants of the Marquis household and asked them to secretly find someone to go to the Zhang family's location. The Zhang family didn't know about this at all. One time, when Zhang Jiujio went out to buy medicine for her father, she directly covered her mouth and nose and fainted. The next morning, Zhang Jiujio was found lying naked on the road with bruises all over her body. Regardless of whether her body was clean or not, in everyone's eyes, this girl's life was ruined after being seen naked by so many people. After Zhang Jiujio returned home, she started to have a fever and spoke nonsense. Even after Zhang Zhensheng found a doctor and confirmed that she was still a virgin, her illness did not get better. She looked thinner and thinner day by day. Moreover, the rumors outside could not be suppressed at all. As a result, Zhang Jiujio propped herself up and went out to pour something. She heard the woman next door, who had always been kind, talking about her. Her words were full of disdain and disdain. After enduring for 2 months, Zhang Jiujio finally couldn't hold on any longer. She broke the teacup and ended her young life. When Zhang Zhensheng heard the news of his daughter's death, he spat out a mouthful of blood and was bedridden for several days. The father and daughter of the Zhang family, who had never done any evil in their lives, died in vain. The ungrateful Zhang Fei and Chen Mingzhu, who looked kind but had a wicked heart, got married smoothly and lived a prosperous life. Gu Xingyin watched this scene silently. Suddenly she asked, Zhang Jiujio's background doesn't seem to fit the main character's identity. According to her past experience, the female lead of every world had a shocking identity. Just from this aspect, Zhang Jiujio seemed to be lacking something. The system replied, so this world is actually a story of rebirth and revenge. Chapter 1930. Gu Xingyin repeated in confusion, reincarnation for revenge? The system nodded, yes, host. You came to Zhang Jiujio's body and changed the fate of the Zhang family before anything happened. You also successfully made Zhang Jiujio a winner in life. Gu Xingyin thought for a while. With Zhang Jiujio's identity as a woman and her family background, there were too many restrictions for her to walk the path of a main character. At this moment, the system added, oh right, host, I forgot to tell you. This world is considered a farming world. Gu Xingyin was stunned. What do you mean? She had a faint premonition in her heart. As expected, the system said, in other words, places like the imperial court in the capital have nothing to do with you. If Zhang Jiujio wants to get rich, she relies on farming? Gu Xingyin asked. The system. The white light on its body flashed a few times before it finally continued. It doesn't have to be limited to farming. You can also grow other things. Gu Xingyin. However, the key was still farming. She felt a little complicated at the moment, but also a little curious. To be honest, in every world, her host body could be said to be from a rich family. This was the first time she had encountered such a down-to-earth main character setting. The system thought that the host was unwilling. It comforted her, host, you don't have to worry too much. After all, Zhang Jiujio's setting is a main character. She definitely won't be the same as ordinary people. As the main character, after Zhang Jiujio was reincarnated, she obtained a very unexpected thing, the Spirit Spring Space. Spirit Spring Space? Gu Xingyin was confused. After that, the system explained to Gu Xingyin what exactly this thing was. Fortunately, Gu Xingyin had transmigrated to a few cultivation worlds and had some understanding of things like storage spaces and arcane realms. Even so, the more she knew, the more she was amazed by this space that Zhang Jiujio possessed. It could store living things, and as the number of times it was used increased, There was also a spirit spring with extremely high spiritual energy within the space. Gu Xingyin confirmed it herself. Not only was the spiritual energy purity of this spiritual spring extremely high, more importantly, it was a living spring with an endless supply of spiritual liquid. Gu Xingyin tried to search for the source of this spiritual spring, but she simply could not find the source of this spiritual spring. Thinking about it, it made sense. To be able to have such means, it was definitely an immortal-level powerhouse. With Gu Xingyin's current situation, it was impossible for her to discover the mystery behind this. Gu Xingyin curiously asked the system if he could cultivate. Then, her suggestion was cruelly rejected by the system. Reason: it was impossible for immortal cultivators to exist in a low-martial ancient world. If Gu Xingyin became the first immortal cultivator, she would definitely be noticed by the laws of the world, which would increase the risk of being exposed. Of course, Gu Xingyin would not take the risk. At this moment, she stood in this space and looked at the spiritual spring that was curling up with white smoke. She looked around and slowly sat down. The system asked curiously, "Host, what are you doing?" Gu Xingyin reached out to feel the level of spiritual liquid in this spiritual spring and replied, "I'm thinking about what I should plant." System. On the other hand, Gu Xingyin's eyes suddenly lit up. "I've thought about it. Plant flowers." With this spiritual spring, she did not have to worry about not being able to grow anything. Since this was the case, compared to other plants that had a longer lifespan and were cheaper, planting flowers was undoubtedly an excellent choice. Chapter 1931. Gu Xingyin made up her mind and looked at the system. Extract skill. The system flashed with a white light. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained the Goddess of Nature's Plant Affinity skill. Gu Xingyin was quite satisfied with this skill. It just so happened that she was planning to grow flowers. With this skill, she would be able to know what plants liked and disliked. It could be considered a double insurance. After communicating with the system, Gu Xingyin finally had time to look at her current situation. She was lying on a small couch in a room. Looking at the appearance of the room, it seemed to be a girl's boudoir. Obviously, this was the original Zhang Jiujiu's room. Gu Xingyin looked around. Although the room wasn't luxurious, it was clean and tidy. The furnishings were simple and elegant. Zhang Jiujiu had also attended a female private school. Her personality was also quite refined. Looking at the appearance of the room, her taste was not bad. Thinking about the time now, Zhang Fei was still at home, studying hard. Gu Xingyin knew from her memories that Zhang Fei's goal was to become a county official. If he was lucky enough to become a high scholar, it would be a pleasant surprise. As for becoming a high scholar, he didn't even dare to think about it. Father Zhang's plan was to wait until Zhang Fei became a county official. Then he would bring up the marriage between him and his daughter. After all, Zhang Jiujiu was now of marriageable age. It was time to talk about marriage. No one knew that in just half a year, so many things would happen. Gu Xingyin slowly let out a sigh of relief. Zhang Fei wasn't a good person. Let's not talk about whether he had any romantic feelings for Zhang Jiujiu. Father Zhang bought him from a human trafficker and raised him well for 9 years. He even sent him to school. Even the money he spent on the exams was from years of savings that Father Zhang couldn't bear to use. With such kindness, after becoming a high scholar, he didn't even want to go home. Zhang Fei's thoughts were very clear. He was afraid that the Zhang family would cling on to him, so he simply wanted to cut off all contact with them. Gu Xingyin sneered. As long as you have a conscience, let's not talk about how you feel about Zhang Jiujiu. If you don't want to marry Zhang Jiujiu, just say it directly. However, the Zhang family's 9 years of upbringing were not in vain. No matter what, you have the honor of going back to see your old father who has been bitterly waiting for the results. He was clearly an ingrate that had not been raised properly. Gu Xingyin slowly rubbed her fingers and thought, if that's the case, I might as well think of a way to make Zhang Fei lose his life to take the Jinshi exam. She thought for a moment, tidied up her clothes, and walked out of the room. Just as she stepped out of the door, Gu Xingyin bumped into Zhang Fei who was walking towards her. She had a shocked expression on her face. She called out to her brother in a low voice and retreated to the side. Zhang Fei stopped in his tracks and saw the girl in the pink dress with her head slightly lowered. A trace of shock flashed across Zhang Fei's eyes. From his angle, he could see half of Gu Xingyin's lowered brows. Her thick eyelashes were slightly curled, like a trembling brush. Under her black hair was white and delicate skin, and half of her slender and beautiful neck could be seen. Zhang Fei's eyes flashed, and he said uncomfortably, "Sister Jiao, where are you going?" He called her so intimately. Gu Xingyin's eyes turned cold. She raised her head and looked at Zhang Fei seriously. "Brother, you and I are not blood-related siblings after all. It's better to call each other politely. Otherwise, people will gossip." Chapter 1932. When Zhang Fei heard this, he was startled. His first reaction was that Zhang Jiujio knew something and was looking down on him. After all, in his current situation, if he really got together with Zhang Jiujio, it would be considered climbing up the social ladder. But when he looked carefully at Zhang Jiujio, he saw that his sister's eyes were as clear as ever, without any haze. Zhang Fei felt relieved. It seemed that Jiujio was getting older and was starting to understand the boundaries between men and women. But the relationship between the two of them, Zhang Fei frowned and said, "Jiujio, you and I grew up together. Our relationship is comparable to that of biological siblings. Outsiders won't say anything." Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes, hiding the coldness in her eyes. Outsiders won't say anything? This world was harsh on women. With her and Zhang Fei's situation, it would be fine if they were together in the future. But if they weren't, the intimacy between the two of them over the years would become a topic of gossip. Naturally, this wouldn't affect Zhang Fei. But to Zhang Jiujio, it would be a stain on her reputation that couldn't be washed away. Did Zhang Fei not know about this? Or did he think that she, Zhang Jiujio, would be his in the future? Gu Xingyin looked up at him and said, "I'm not as well read as Big Brother, but I know that even if we're siblings, there's a principle that men and women don't eat together when they're 7 years old. Big Brother, you're about to take the provincial examination, so you should pay attention to your reputation." She knew what was most important to Zhang Fei. As expected, when the provincial examination was mentioned, Zhang Fei's expression immediately changed. He quickly said, "Sister Jiujio is right. Big Brother was too rash." Gu Xingyin smiled at him and didn't say anything else. She walked toward her father, Zhang Genxing's room. Zhang Fei stood behind her and looked at her back in a daze. Thinking of Zhang Jiujio's beautiful face, Zhang Fei felt even more excited. He didn't expect that the girl who had followed him around and called him Big Brother since young would become so outstanding. Thinking that such a beautiful girl would be his wife in the future, Zhang Fei couldn't help but feel a fire in his heart. Gu Xingyin obviously sensed Zhang Fei's gaze behind her. She furrowed her brows in disgust. With the help of the system, Zhang Fei's little tricks were all displayed in front of Gu Xingyin. For example, Zhang Fei was one of the more popular young masters in the town. He was considered to be well-read in the town. In the eyes of outsiders, he was the young master of the wealthy Zhang family. He was a rare candidate for a son-in-law. Zhang Fei often received shy and timid smiles from the girls. Occasionally, when he went out for a walk, he would receive a steaming hot bowl of tea from the tea maidens and handkerchiefs with a strong fragrance. As for Zhang Fei, even though he had guessed the relationship between him and Zhang Jiujio, he did not avoid it at all. In fact, he even enjoyed it. Gu Xingyin had no doubt that even if Zhang Fei had married Zhang Jiujio, he wouldn't have been a good match even if those things hadn't happened in the original plot. Thinking of this, Gu Xingyin arrived outside her father's room. Zhang Genxing was checking the account books. He owned a small clothing store in the town. The business was neither good nor bad. It was enough to support a family. Seeing his daughter come over, Zhang Genxing raised his head and put down the account books in his hands. "Jiujio, what's the matter?" he asked with a smile. Chapter 1933. Gu Xingyin looked at Zhang Genxing. He was of medium height and had a thin face. He was wearing a green robe that was half new. Rather than a merchant, he looked more like a weak scholar. Gu Shengyin looked at her father's handsome face and understood who Zhang Jiujio had inherited her good looks from. The father of this body was a handsome middle-aged uncle. It was no wonder that after Zhang Zhensheng passed the new year and had such a big daughter, matchmakers kept coming to the town to propose marriage. Gu Shengyin walked in front of her father and said, "Father, I went to the temple to burn incense a few days ago and picked up an ancient book on the way back. There were all kinds of ways to plant flowers in it. It was said that the flowers raised with those methods are more beautiful than ordinary flowers. I wanted to buy some seeds to try." Zhang Zhensheng asked doubtfully, "Why haven't I heard you mention it?" Gu Shengyin stuck out her tongue and said, "I was looking at it for fun. Who knew that the book would suddenly disappear the day before yesterday? I just remembered it today." Zhang Zhensheng didn't take it to heart. These ordinary flower seeds weren't too expensive and he had always cherished his only daughter. He immediately said, "I'll go to the shop in the afternoon and bring you some seeds when I come back. What kind of flowers do you like?" Gu Shengyin thought for a moment and said, "Just buy some cheap ones. I'll just plant them for fun." Zhang Zhensheng nodded. Gu Shengyin didn't leave after saying this. She stood to the side and bit her lip. She suddenly asked, "Father, do you want me to marry brother Zhang Fei?" Zhang Zhensheng was stunned. He had always had this idea and he knew that Zhang Fei had seen it but had never told his daughter. He asked curiously, "Why are you suddenly asking this?" Gu Shengyin pulled on his sleeve and pouted. "I'm not stupid." Zhang Zhensheng thought that his daughter had grown up and had her own thoughts. He laughed and sighed. "Daddy is getting old. My Jiujio needs someone reliable to take care of her." This was a tacit agreement. Gu Shengyin pouted. "But I don't want to marry brother Zhang Fei." Zhang Zhensheng was stunned and asked, "Why?" From his point of view, Zhang Fei was a very good candidate for a husband in this town. He was knowledgeable, good-looking, and polite. There were even many families who didn't know the inside story and sent matchmakers to propose marriage for him. Gu Shengyin said, "Your daughter has always treated brother Zhang Fei as her own brother, and brother Zhang Fei is very popular with the girls." The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. Zhang Zhensheng frowned. "You're saying that Zhang Fei is very popular with the girls?" Gu Shengyin said with certainty, "Yes, many of my sisters like brother Zhang Fei. One of them even said that brother Zhang Fei accepted her handkerchief." She then explained, "It's not a personal item. It's just a towel used to wipe sweat." Even so, it was enough to attract Zhang Zhensheng's attention. He took 2 deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. He said to his daughter, "Jiujio, it's been a bit hot recently. Don't go out if you don't have anything to do. Daddy is going to the shop." Gu Shengyin nodded obediently and walked out of the room. Zhang Zhensheng called the old servant in the house, Uncle Yuan, with a cold face and asked him to inquire about something. Chapter 1934. This small town was only so big, so it wasn't difficult to ask around. When Zhang Zhensheng returned home from the shop in the evening, Uncle Yuan also followed him home. Zhang Zhensheng listened to Uncle Yuan's narration, and his face became gloomier and gloomier. Uncle Yuan had followed his master since he was young, and he also watched Zhang Jiujio grow up. He didn't have a wife, so he naturally looked at Miss as if he was looking at his own daughter. After Uncle Yuan finished, he couldn't help but say, "Forgive this old servant for speaking out of turn, master. This young Master Zhang Fei is really not a good match." They didn't know if they didn't ask, but once they asked around, they found out that Zhang Fei was actually such a person. Of course, Zhang Fei didn't do anything out of line, but he had a good relationship with many girls of the right age in this town. They were all men, so how could Zhang Zhensheng not understand Zhang Fei? To be honest, if Zhang Fei was his own son, he wouldn't have any opinions at all. But Zhang Fei was the one he liked, and he wanted to be his daughter's son-in-law. This was a big problem. In this world, no father would want his daughter to marry a man who cherished the fairer sex. Zhang Zhensheng said with some lingering fear, "Luckily, I thought of this today and asked you to ask around." Uncle Yuan stood at the side and didn't say anything. Zhang Zhensheng thought for a while and made a decision. After all, he had never said his plans out loud. In 2 days he would personally talk to Zhang Fei. Gu Shengyin didn't know what her father did, but she could guess that with Zhang Genxing's love for his daughter, if he knew what kind of person Zhang Fei was, he would definitely not let her marry him. After the family finished dinner that day, Zhang Genxing gave a small bag and a few flower pots to Gu Shengyin. Then he called Zhang Fei to his room. Fei, counting the days, you've been in our Zhang family for 10 years. Zhang Genxing looked at the tall and handsome young man in front of him and felt a little emotional. Zhang Fei was a little confused, and he didn't know why Zhang Genxing suddenly brought him here. But after hearing Zhang Genxing's words, he had a guess in his heart. Could it be? He was inexplicably excited. Could it be that father was going to officially announce his marriage with Sister Jiujio? Thinking of this, he felt a little excited, especially when he thought of the Sister Jiujio he had seen in the past few days. She was clearly still the same person, but no matter how he looked at her, he felt that she was becoming more and more beautiful. He looked at Zhang Genxing and said emotionally, if it weren't for father's kindness, I don't know what Zhang Fei would be in right now. When Zhang Genxing heard this, he felt gratified. At least she knew how to be grateful. He nodded to himself, feeling that he had made a good decision. He opened his mouth and said, I plan to arrange a few banquets in 2 days and invite the neighbors to officially adopt you. From now on, you are my son, Zhang Genxing, and Jiujio's elder brother. What do you think? His words were like a bolt from the blue, jolting Zhang Fei awake from his beautiful dream. Adopted son? But this was different from what he knew. Shouldn't he be the son-in-law? Zhang Fei was confused and didn't reply to Zhang Genxing. Zhang Genxing frowned and asked, What's wrong? Are you not satisfied with your father's arrangements? Chapter 1935. Zhang Fei snapped out of his daze and opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. Was he supposed to say, No, I don't want to be your son. I want to be your son-in-law? Zhang Fei was sure that if he said such words, he would probably be chased away by his kind father with a broom. But he really couldn't accept it. So what if he was adopted? He was still not his biological son. In the future, most of the Zhang family's things would still be left to Zhang Jiujio. What could he get as an adopted son? He still had to support Zhang Genxing in his old age. How good would it be if he was his son-in-law? The Zhang family only had one daughter. If Zhang Jiujio married him with the entire Zhang family, the wealth and beauty would all be his. But why was everything different from what he had expected? He had many things he wanted to say, but under Zhang Genxing's earnest gaze, Zhang Fei could only open his mouth and say with some reluctance, Your son is just too happy. The matter was settled just like that. Zhang Genxing's expression softened when he saw this and said, Then go have a good rest. The provincial examination is coming soon. Take care of your body. Zhang Fei, who was filled with melancholy, walked out the door and didn't notice Zhang Genxing's cold expression. Seeing Zhang Fei walk out of the room, Zhang Genxing's expression finally relaxed. As a businessman, he didn't miss the unwillingness on Zhang Fei's face after he said his plan. There was even a hint of resentment. Resentment? What was there to be resentment about? Zhang Genxing had nothing to say to Zhang Fei. If he hadn't bought him back then, who knew what Zhang Fei's situation would be like now? How could he have the days he had now? Zhang Genxing sighed. He never expected that he would make such a huge mistake in judging people his whole life. Fortunately, he had seen it clearly in time. Otherwise, Jiujio, thinking of his daughter, he felt a lingering fear. He also silently thought that he had to check properly and find a good husband for Jiujio. Since he had made up his mind, Zhang Genxing's actions were naturally very fast. He spent some money to buy a few tables of food and wine and personally invited many neighbors he had a good relationship with to his house. After this meal, everyone knew that boss Zhang, who owned a clothing store, had adopted the child he had raised from a young age. This kind of thing, everyone was just watching for fun. They all praised Zhang Genxing for his kindness and said that he would be rewarded in the future. In the entire banquet, the most sullen person was Zhang Fei. Even though he was feeling extremely uncomfortable, he still had to pretend to be happy and grateful on the surface. After all, He was only 16 years old and was far from being able to hide his emotions. However, many people could already tell that something was amiss. This newly promoted young Master Zhang didn't seem to be too happy. Therefore, after the banquet was over, a few neighbors who had a good relationship with Zhang Zhensheng secretly mentioned it to him. Zhang Zhensheng remembered the kindness of these people in his heart. On the surface, he could only say that Zhang Fei was under a lot of pressure because the provincial examination was coming up. But the impression he had of Zhang Fei in his heart was much worse. Gu Xingyin was the happiest. Although she knew that her father wouldn't sit idly by, she didn't expect him to act so quickly and resolve the matter between her and Zhang Fei in just a few days. Now that Zhang Fei had offered tea and kowtowed to his father in front of so many people, he was a proper member of the Zhang family. When others thought of Zhang Fei and Zhang Jiujiu, they would only think of them as siblings and wouldn't associate them with anything else. Then, the next thing she needed to do was to let her good brother get a good result in the examination. Chapter 1936. Over the next few days, Gu Xingyin grew flowers every day and waited for Zhang Fei to take the provincial examination. Zhang Zhensheng brought her rose seeds. He thought that a young girl like his daughter would probably like pink and big flowers like roses. Gu Xingyin did not care about what kind of flower it was. She only wanted to prove her skills in growing flowers in front of Zhang Zhensheng. Every day, she scooped some water from the spirit spring in her space and put it into a big bucket of clear water. Gu Xingyin had done a few experiments. This spirit spring water could be directly taken orally. However, the spirit energy in the spirit spring water was too dense. An ordinary person's body could not withstand it and had to be mixed with clear water before taking it. It was the same for flowers and plants. Very soon she saw results. Very soon, tender green sprouts sprouted from the small flower pots. Gu Xingyin looked at the growth speed of these roses. It seemed to be much faster than ordinary roses. Fortunately, this speed was only a little faster and was not too ridiculous. She did not need to waste time looking for an excuse. Zhang Gensheng's mood was very good recently. Jiujiu was becoming more and more sensible. Recently, after lunch, she would personally brew a cup of tea for him. He did not know if it was a psychological effect, but Zhang Zhensheng always felt that the tea in his daughter's hands tasted sweeter and more fragrant. Moreover, during this period of time, he always felt that his spirit was exceptionally good. His body seemed to be filled with abundant energy. One day, when he woke up early to tidy up his clothes, Zhang Zhensheng even found that the few strands of silver that had faintly appeared on his temples due to days of hard work had disappeared. If there was an abnormality, then it was a demon. Zhang Zhensheng felt a little uneasy in his heart. That day, he carefully instructed the workers in the shop, and worriedly went to find a famous old doctor in the town to have a look. It was said that the old doctor's ancestor was an imperial doctor in the capital. When he was young, he was also a very famous doctor. In his later years, he moved to this quiet town to live out his remaining years. Of course, no one knew whether this was true or not, but it was true that the old doctor was highly skilled. If anyone in the town had a headache or fever, he only needed to prescribe some medicine, and it was guaranteed that the illness would be cured the next day. At this moment, the old doctor narrowed his eyes and placed one hand on Zhang Gensheng's pulse, his brows tightly knitted together. Seeing this, Zhang Zhensheng felt even more uncertain. After a long time, the old doctor finally released his hand and looked at Zhang Zhensheng with a strange look in his eyes. Zhang Zhensheng looked at the doctor and asked cautiously, "Doctor, do I have some kind of incurable disease?" The old doctor rolled his eyes at him and said angrily, "Yes, that's right. I think you have a very serious illness." Zhang Zhensheng was shocked. He hurriedly asked, "Then, can the doctor treat him?" The old doctor said unhurriedly, "I see that your body is so strong that you can kill a cow, but your brain might be seriously ill." Zhang Zhensheng, "Wait a minute." He quickly understood the meaning behind his boss's words. He asked in surprise, "So, doctor, I'm actually not sick?" The old doctor said, "Not only are you not sick, I see that your body is better than many of the young people in town." Zhang Zhensheng frowned. He knew his own body well. All these years, he had been busy with the matters of the shop and was somewhat exhausted. Although there would not be any major problems, it was inevitable that he would be somewhat weak. Why did the old doctor say that there was no problem at all? Chapter 1937. He told the old doctor about his recent changes. The old doctor pondered for a moment. Did you eat any nourishing herbs recently? After saying that, he shook his head. How could there be something with such an effect in this small town? Even if there was, it wasn't something an ordinary businessman like Zhang Zhenxing could have. Sure enough, Zhang Zhenxing quickly denied it. Don't joke around. I'm just a small businessman. How could I have the spare money to buy some nourishing herbs? This topic was left unsettled. Zhang Zhenxing was on tenterhooks for a period of time. When he finally confirmed that his body had returned to a good state, he was finally relieved. This was a good thing. Gu Shengyin saw the changes in her father these days. Looking at Zhang Zhenxing's anxious appearance, she wanted to say something, but she couldn't say anything. Say that his changes were related to her? How would she explain what happened later? It was best that no one else in this world knew about the spatial spirit spring. Such an existence was enough to attract countless people. With the Zhang family's ability, there was no way to protect it. When the time came, only destruction awaited the Zhang family. Fortunately, Zhang Zhenxing didn't care about it after a period of hesitation. Gu Shengyin was also relieved. She got up and looked at the small pots in front of her window. The green seedlings inside had already grown more than half a foot tall. The whole plant looked green and glistening. Even if it didn't even have a bud now, it was still very pleasing to look at. Even Zhang Zhenxing had seen it once and had to admit that his daughter did a good job of raising this flower. Gu Shengyin couldn't help laughing. How could it not be good? She used the spirit spring water to water it every few days and had to listen to their opinions. How much to water or how little to water was the most suitable? She looked at these small seedlings and silently said in her heart, "You have to work hard. Whether or not you can complete the task in the future depends on your performance." And at this time, the provincial examination was finally about to begin. The day before the provincial examination, Zhang Zhenxing didn't even go to the shop. He personally bought a lot of ingredients and asked Mrs. Lin at home to make a table of good dishes. Originally, there was no cook at home. Everything was done by Uncle Yuan. Later on, Zhang Fei was studying and had to take part in the imperial examinations. His daughter had slowly grown up. Zhang Zhenxing felt that he could no longer eat like this, so he hired a cook. This meal could be considered a pleasant one. Although Zhang Zhenxing didn't have a good impression of Zhang Fei, he still wished him well. After dinner, everyone returned to their rooms. Gu Shengyin watched from afar as the lights in Zhang Fei's room were turned off. This was very rare. In the past, the lights in Zhang Fei's room would stay on until midnight. Gu Shengyin glanced in that direction and the corners of his lips curled into a cold smile. Zhang Fei purposely didn't study today because he wanted to have a good night's rest so that he could conserve his energy for tomorrow's exam. Before he fell asleep, he was still in a daze, thinking that he had to pass the county scholar examination. It would be best if he was lucky enough to pass the high scholar examination. At that time, he would make Zhang Zhenxing regret not marrying his daughter to him. He slowly fell asleep. Then, the next day, Zhang Fei woke up with a start. He only felt that he seemed to have had an extremely frightening dream the entire night. But now, if you asked him to think about what he had dreamed of, he couldn't say. Only the extreme dark and oppressive feeling of the dream still remained in his heart. Chapter 1938. Zhang Fei felt a little dizzy in his head and was not very clear-headed. But looking at the time, it was already dawn. It was time for him to get up. In the morning, the whole family got up very early. Zhang Zhenxing saw that his face was still a little worried. Zhang Fei forced a smile and said that he was fine. With him going to participate in the provincial examination in this state, the results could be imagined. Zhang Fei went home with a sour face. Even when Gu Shengyin went to greet him, he only replied coldly. After 2 days, Gu Xingyin found out that Zhang Fei had been absent-minded in the examination room and had not even finished answering the paper. Time slowly passed in Gu Xingyin's leisure and Zhang Fei's anxiety. When the results of the provincial examination came out, Gu Xingyin's pots of roses finally bloomed for the first time. It was really beautiful. Gu Xingyin could not help but carefully look at her own work. This rose was about a foot tall. Its leaves were dense and green. The leaves were so green that they seemed to be glowing. Looking at them made one feel refreshed. And on those leaves, there were several pink flower buds. One of them had already bloomed. The pink petals spread out in layers. From the center of the deep pink, they slowly extended outwards. When they reached the outermost area, there was only a bit of white left. It was like a layer of sparkling fluorescent powder. There were wisps of a delicate fragrance in the room. It was refreshing but not greasy. It was very comfortable. Gu Xingyin was sure that if this pot of flowers was taken out and said that it was the most common type of rose, no one would believe it. When it was time for dinner, Zhang Fei did not come out. Uncle Yuan said that the young master was sulking alone in the room. Zhang Zhensheng asked for food to be left for him. The father and daughter had dinner together. The work and rest in the small town was early. After dinner, the sky had not yet turned dark. Gu Xingyin mysteriously said that she wanted to show Zhang Zhensheng something. Zhang Zhensheng looked at his daughter's treasured look and found it funny. He followed her very cooperatively. Then, he saw the pots of flowers neatly placed on the windowsill. Zhang Zhensheng was stunned. This? He looked at Gu Xingyin in disbelief. Are these the rose seeds I bought for you? Gu Xingyin nodded with a smile. Zhang Zhensheng was puzzled. Could it be that the boss lost his mind and sold me some precious seed as an ordinary seed? But even he didn't believe what he said. Everyone had known the auntie who sold flowers in town for many years. She was also in the business of selling ordinary flowers. That was because no one in this town would buy such expensive flowers. Zhang Zhensheng looked at his daughter. He didn't expect that his daughter, who he thought was just for fun, would actually be such a good thing. After all, Zhang Zhensheng was a businessman. In a short moment, he came up with an excellent way out in his mind. If his daughter really had this ability, with such a skilled companion, he didn't have to worry that his daughter would have no one to rely on after he left. After thinking for a while, he asked, Jojo, if I let you raise other flowers, can you raise them like this? When Gu Xingyin heard this, she knew that her father was thinking long-term. She quickly said, Yes, I can raise any kind of flower. Zhang Zhensheng nodded and said, You should continue to take care of these plants. Tomorrow, father will buy some seeds. You should take care of them for a while. When the time comes, I'll go to the county to take a look. It's said that those rich families love to raise these plants. Gu Xingyin let out a long sigh of relief. Having a father who knew how to do things could really save her a lot of trouble. Ahem, there's still one more chapter to go. Chapter 1939. Zhang Fei felt that things were not going well for him. He didn't know when it started, but he felt that everything was wrong. It was as if everything was going against him. Ever since he failed in the provincial examination, he had locked himself in his room and hadn't gone out for a few days. Some of his classmates in town had passed the county examination and invited him to a gathering, but he refused. Others didn't say it, but they all despised him for being petty in their hearts. Zhang Zhensheng originally thought that it was because he had suffered a blow and was feeling uncomfortable. It was normal for him to be depressed in his room for a few days. But he didn't expect that after a few days, Zhang Fei still couldn't come out. Zhang Zhensheng was a bit disappointed in him. He didn't expect Zhang Fei to be such an irresponsible person. So what if he failed once? At worst, he could start all over again. He personally went to Zhang Fei's room and saw him sitting at the table with a crazed expression. The floor was covered in ink and waste paper. Zhang Zhensheng's original anger became somewhat unbearable. After all, he was only a teenager. He sighed and sat down, personally chatting with Zhang Fei. As they spoke, Zhang Zhensheng suddenly thought of something. Right, you know the Zhang family in town, right? Their family is in the rice business. Boss Zhang sent someone to ask me some things. Father wants to ask you, what do you think of the Zhang family's young miss? Zhang Fei came back to his senses. His heart was filled with negative emotions. When he heard Zhang Genxing's words, the first thing that came to his mind was that Zhang Genxing thought he was useless and wanted him to quickly start a family. He had seen the Zhang family's young miss before. She was a delicate and pretty daughter of a humble family. Compared to Jiao Mei, she was far inferior. Zhang Fei's gaze turned cold. He said softly, I don't want to start a family so early. I still want to try. I can't accept it. Zhang Genxing didn't plan on directly agreeing. Seeing that he wasn't willing, he didn't say anything. He stood up and patted Zhang Fei's shoulder. You are still young. There will be many opportunities in the future. It doesn't matter if you fail once. Zhang Fei watched him walk out of the room in a daze. The corner of his mouth hooked up into a cold smile. You want to get rid of me? No way. Thinking of Zhang Jiaojiao's beautiful face, Zhang Fei suddenly had a vicious plan. Gu Xingyin, who was thinking about getting rich as soon as possible, didn't realize that Zhang Fei was feeling restless again. She sighed with some worry, feeling that she still had a long way to go. Depending on selling flowers to reach the peak of life, no matter how she thought about it, it was a very difficult thing. Moreover, the target of the mission was the first miss of the Marquis mansion. Although the Mingyi Marquis mansion was only an empty shell, it was still a first-rank noble title. Now that he thought about it, the distance between him and her was really quite far. The next day, Zhang Fei woke up early, tidied himself up, and changed into a new set of clothes. Looking at him now, he had become that handsome young man again. Just by looking at him carefully, one could see the gloominess in his eyes that he couldn't hide. Gu Shengyin bumped into Zhang Fei the moment she stepped out of the door. She stopped in her tracks and greeted Zhang Fei. Good morning, big brother. Zhang Fei looked at her carefully and said with a smile, I haven't seen you for a few days. Little sister Jiaojiao has become prettier again. Gu Shengyin frowned. Even if they were siblings, these words were too rash. This Zhang Fei, what was he thinking? Chapter 1940. To be honest, although Zhang Fei's words contained a trace of flattery, most of what he said was the truth. He felt that after not seeing his sister for a few days, she seemed to have become more beautiful. It was indeed so. For the past few days, Gu Xingyin had been adding a drop of spirit spring water to his drinking water every day. He would also use some when he bathed. It was not obvious at first, but after a few days, there were obvious changes in his body. For example, her originally young and fair skin had become more delicate and lustrous. Some small flaws that she had not noticed before had all disappeared. Her complexion was much better than before. At this moment, in Zhang Fei's eyes, he felt that Zhang Jiaojiao's entire body seemed to be glowing as she stood in front of him. He already knew that his sister was beautiful, but this was the first time he realized that Zhang Jiaojiao was actually this beautiful. A trace of infatuation flashed through Zhang Fei's eyes, and his face became even more tender. He looked gently at Gu Shengyin and said, Sister Jiaojiao, I heard that there is a flower forest outside the town with beautiful scenery. Would you like to go with me and have some fun? Gu Shengyin frowned. She felt that Zhang Fei's gaze was glued to her body, and it made her feel extremely uncomfortable. He actually still did not give up. Gu Shengyin took a step back and said, The sun is a little bright outside, and I don't have the patience to go out. Brother, why don't you find a few like-minded friends to go with you? This was a rejection. Zhang Fei's face turned cold when he heard this. However, he still said gently, That's right. Sister Jiaojiao is such a beautiful and delicate girl. It won't be good if you get sunburnt. Gu Xingyin's face fell. She finally understood that Zhang Fei really did not give up. Was this something that an elder brother should say to his sister? She said in a low voice, Brother is a scholar. You should know that there is a difference between men and women. This kind of words is not suitable for you to say to your sister. Zhang Fei saw that her pink face was angry, and her face was as cold as snow. However, it had a different kind of charm, and he was even more captivated. He said, Sister Jiaojiao, can't you see my sincerity? I've never treated you like a brother or sister. You should have been mine from the start. Shut up. Gu Shengyin snapped. She never thought that Zhang Fei would actually be so bold as to directly say such words. She angrily said, "Could it be that elder brother lost his mind in the exam? How could he say such absurd words? Now that you've been taken in as an adopted son by father, you're a proper member of the Zhang family. How can you speak such incoherent words to your own sister?" She turned around and left. Zhang Fei also reacted abruptly. While blaming himself for being impulsive, he subconsciously chased after Gu Shengyin in an attempt to stop her. However, he did not expect that Zhang Jiujio, who looked delicate and weak, would be so fast. Panicking, he quickly ran over to pull her away. Gu Shengyin's sharp eyes noticed the pool at the side of the corridor. Her footsteps suddenly slowed down, as if she was exhausted. Zhang Fei took the opportunity to grab her sleeve. Then, Gu Shengyin pulled her hand away. He did not see her move, but Zhang Fei felt a strong force hit somewhere on his waist. His body went limp, and he was dragged back by inertia. The ice-cold water poured down from the top of his head, submerging his entire body. Chapter 1941. Gu Shengyin stood by the pillar and quietly watched Zhang Fei struggle in the water. Zhang Fei didn't know how to swim, so she had to teach him a lesson. She pretended to be frightened and said in a shrill voice, "Brother, are you okay? Come up quickly." Zhang Fei, who was struggling in the water, was speechless. He actually wanted to say, "If I could come up, would I need you to tell me? Don't just scream, go call for help." But the moment he opened his mouth, cold water poured into his nose and mouth, and he couldn't speak at all. Gu Shengyin panicked and screamed for a while before she finally remembered that there was someone else in the residence. She let out a "nah" and said anxiously, "Uncle Yuan is in the room, I'll go call for help." She then turned and ran away. Zhang Fei was speechless. Gu Shengyin leisurely walked to the west wing where Uncle Yuan was. He even took the time to take a look at the roses he was raising. She estimated that it was about time and screamed, Uncle Yuan, brother fell into the water." By the time Uncle Yuan scooped Zhang Fei up, he was already somewhat unconscious. Gu Shengyin watched coldly. He definitely wouldn't die, but he would definitely suffer. Sure enough, after the doctor examined him, he said, "It's nothing serious, but the patient might have been frightened and infected with cold air, so he needs to rest in bed." That night, Zhang Fei started to have a fever. Zhang Zhenxing only returned home at night. When he heard that Zhang Fei had fallen into the water, he went to take a look at him with a worried expression. After all, he had raised a child for 9 years. How could he not have any feelings for him? When he returned to the house, he found his daughter sitting there. "Jiujio!" Zhang Zhenxing shouted in surprise. Normally, if there was nothing going on, his daughter wouldn't specially wait for him. Gu Shengyin glanced at him and suddenly said, "I was the one who pushed you into the pool." Zhang Gensheng's eyes widened. "Jiujio," he looked at Gu Shengyin for a long time, and his tense expression suddenly relaxed. "Is there a special reason?" Hearing this, Gu Shengyin felt warmth in her heart. Zhang Zhenxing still believed in his daughter. He didn't blame her immediately. Instead, he asked himself why. Her eyes reddened, and she looked at her father as if she had been wronged. "Brother, she took a deep breath and told him what had happened during the day. "What did you say?" Zhang Zhenxing had just sat down and was about to take a sip of tea when he heard that. He immediately stood up. "That bastard!" Zhang Zhenxing looked at his daughter nervously. "Is Jiujio all right?" Gu Shengyin shook her head. "I struggled and somehow he fell into the water." Zhang Gensheng's expression softened when he heard that his daughter was fine. "That's good. This has nothing to do with Jiujio." He said to Gu Shengyin, "Jiujio, don't be afraid. I'll talk to your elder brother." Gu Shengyin nodded obediently. She knew that if she was a timid girl, she might feel scared and ashamed and directly hide it. However, this method was useless except for increasing the arrogance of people like Zhang Fei. Gu Shengyin returned to her house under Zhang Gensheng's constant concern. She didn't see Zhang Fei again for a long time. She only found out after asking Zhang Zhenxing. It turned out that Zhang Fei had been recuperating. After he recovered, Zhang Zhenxing found a reason to send him out. Chapter 1942. This reason was a little far-fetched. It was said that an elder of the Zhang family was critically ill, and Zhang Zhenxing had asked Zhang Fei to visit him. In fact, Zhang Zhenxing's family had almost nothing to do with the so-called Zhang family. That elder's health was not good, and a branch family like Zhang Zhenxing did not need to do anything. It was hard for Zhang Zhenxing to finally think of this matter after putting in so much effort. The Zhang family's main family was in a city far away in the north. Gu Xingyin calculated. Just the journey alone would take Zhang Fei a month or two. In addition, there would be a delay when he reached that place. As it turned out, she would not be able to see this annoying fellow for a long time. Gu Xingyin was in a good mood. The flowers and plants under her hands seemed to feel their master's mood, and all of them became brighter. Another month passed. The more than 10 pots of plants in Gu Xingyin's courtyard had all bloomed. Zhang Zhenxing was becoming more and more attentive to these things. Recently, he came every day to check on the situation. One day, after he returned from the shop, he said to Gu Xingyin, "Jiujio, I'll personally hire a car tomorrow to carry your flowers to the county. I'll ask Uncle Yuan to stay at home. Be careful." Gu Xingyin nodded. "Father, don't worry. I'll be fine at home. You, on the other hand, have to be careful along the way." Zhang Zhenxing smiled. The next day he set off. Gu Xingyin waited at home. On the 5th day, Zhang Zhenxing returned. Gu Xingyin went out to welcome him. Seeing the relaxed look on his face, she knew that the result was good. Sure enough, after closing the door, Zhang Zhenxing no longer hid the smile on his face. He took out a money bag from his chest and poured out the silver in the palm of his hand. "There are 40 taels of silver here." Zhang Zhenxing's eyes seemed to be shining. This time, there were a total of 15 pots of flowers. He had just pulled them to the market when someone came over to ask for the price. Zhang Zhenxing placed his flowers in that direction. Compared to the flowers in the hands of the peddlers, the flowers in the hands of the peddlers were simply too shabby. Fortunately, Zhang Zhen was cautious and had inquired about the price beforehand. In the end, he quoted a price, which was 2 taels of silver per basin. There were a few basins that were extra nourished, so they were even more expensive. This price, compared to this kind of ordinary flower, was completely sky-high. It had to be known that other flower sellers, such as roses, could choose from 2 pots in this county town for 1 or 2 taels of silver. His flowers were 4 times more expensive than others. Zhang Zhenxing had his own thoughts. He knew that in this county town, those who had the time to buy flowers would definitely not lack the money. If he really wanted to develop here in the future, he had to make a good opening. He was absolutely right. He put the flowers out in the morning, and they were all sold out before the sun went down. Zhang Zhenxing knew in his heart that he would definitely be noticed by someone with ulterior motives. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he didn't even have time to rest after selling his things. He hurriedly drove back home. His mood was very agitated along the way. 40 taels of silver. He could only save that much money by running a shop for a year. His daughter only raised a few pots of flowers. The price of these pots of flowers added together was not even worth 1 tael of silver. "Jiujio, father wants to discuss something with you." Chapter 1943. When Gu Xingyin heard her father's plan, she sighed in admiration. It turned out that Zhang Zhenxing was talking to her about the matter of raising flowers. There was a huge business opportunity in this. Zhang Zhenxing's main idea was that they could go to the market and buy more seeds, divided into ordinary and rare seeds. They could try to set up a shop in the county and see the results. Zhang Zhenxing could see clearly that selling flowers in this town was not feasible. No matter how good the things were, not many people had the time and money to buy them. However, it was different in the county. He rambled on, and the general idea was that they would go to the high-end market in the future and sell flowers to those rich families. They could ask for a higher price and they would not need to compete with the ordinary vendors for the market. Gu Shengyin nodded continuously. There's one more thing. Zhang Zhenxing suddenly said. I've asked around. In Yun County, the highest position is the county magistrate and the aristocratic Li family, who has been here for a few generations. The county magistrate is the parent official. It is said that the Li family has several officials in the imperial court. They cannot be ignored. I went to buy a few seedlings, one of which is an orchid and one of which is an 18 scholar. Take good care of them. When the time comes, use them to explore the road. When Zhang Zhenxing said this, he felt a little heartache. These few seedlings cost him a lot of money. Gu Xingyi nodded. She was impressed by her father's thoughtfulness. They had no roots in Yun County. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Being able to get the care of the local dignitaries was the foundation of their survival. Zhang Zhenxing gave some flower seeds to his daughter. Other than the 2 special potted plants, the rest were common plants in the market. They had a short planting cycle. Thinking about the use of the 2 potted plants, Gu Shengyin sighed and used 120% of her energy to take care of them. Fortunately, under the water of the spiritual spring, these plants not only grew well, but also grew at a very fast speed. 2 months later, Gu Shengyin's small courtyard was full of blooming flowers of various colors. The fragrance was pleasant, and many colorful butterflies were attracted to them. Zhang Zhenxing looked at the 2 pots of flowers given to him by Gu Shengyin with astonishment. He was a businessman, and after so many years, his eyesight had become sharp. Naturally, he could see that these 2 pots of flowers, which were originally not considered precious, had become completely different in his daughter's hands. As for the purpose of this trip, his confidence had increased from 70% to 90%. Zhang Zhenxing once again set foot on the road to Yun County. He first went to the Li family because the county magistrate of Yun County was said to be a disciple of one of the old masters of the Li family. In front of the Li family's old madam, it was said that the magistrate of the county also acted like a junior. At the same time in the Li family, Li Jun, the eldest son of the second branch of the Li family, was one of the top young masters in Yun County. He was respectfully following behind a man in purple. That purple-robed man's face was incomparably handsome, and his entire body emitted an imposing aura. He could be considered to be a gentleman, and when Li Jun stood in front of him, the difference in status was immediately apparent. The man's expression seemed cold, but upon closer inspection, one could see a trace of impatience between his eyebrows. Master Qi, this is our Li family's, The man seemed to have sensed something and walked towards a certain direction. Li Jun was stunned for a moment, but he reacted and hurriedly followed. The purple-robed man walked directly in front of a servant holding a pot of flowers. That servant was frightened by his imposing aura and quickly knelt down. The purple-robed man ignored him and only asked in a low voice, "This flower, where did it come from?" He was pointing at the pink rose in the servant's arms. Chapter 1944. The servant was stunned and said with a trembling voice, "This is a pot of roses that third miss bought a few days ago." Before he could finish, the purple-robed man had already lowered his body. He bent down and casually picked a pink rose. He put it at the tip of his nose and sniffed it lightly. A slight smile appeared on his face. Li Jun, who was following behind him, felt strange. This young Master Qi's identity was quite shocking. It was a surprise that he would come to the Li family this time. Due to his age, the elders in the family had arranged the important task of accompanying him. 2 days had passed. Although this person's etiquette was perfect on the surface, his words and actions did not have the slightest intention of getting close to the Li family. Speaking of which, just now, it was the first time Li Jun had seen this young Master Qi smile in a long time. He looked curiously at the rose. Other than the leaves being greener and the flowers being bigger, there was nothing special about it. The purple-robed man held the flower in one hand and looked behind him. There were 2 servants behind him, each holding a pot of roses in their hands. From the looks of it, they came from the same place as the ones in front. He walked over and looked at each of them. Sure enough, This feeling, these 3 pots of flowers gave people an extra sense of comfort. He asked the servant who spoke earlier, "Can you still find the person who sold the flowers?" The servant shook his head respectfully. "I just happened to see him when I was shopping." Later, third young miss liked the 3 pots of flowers very much. She ordered me to go to the market to see if I could buy other flowers, but I never saw the flower seller again. The purple-robed man who was called Young Master Chi frowned. Li Jun finally found a chance to speak. He asked, "Young Master Chi, is there anything special about these flowers?" The purple-robed man looked sideways at him and said, "I liked them at first sight. It's probably fate." Li Jun, if he believed this, there would be something wrong with his brain. However, he felt that he did not have the guts to say this out loud. He did not even dare to show that he was still puzzled. At this moment, a servant in green suddenly came in from outside the corner door. The purple-robed man's eyes were instantly attracted. The reason was none other than the fact that the green-clothed servant was actually holding an extremely exquisite white flower pot, and within the flower pot was a blooming 18 scholar. Although Li Jun did not like flowers, he had heard a little about the famous camellia of the 18 scholars. Moreover, judging from the appearance of this 18 scholar, it was definitely the best of the best. He asked in surprise, "Madam went to buy camellias again?" Many people in Yun County knew that the old madam of the Li family liked camellias. The servant in green bowed to the two and then said, "No, just now a merchant came in and said that he wanted to give this pot of flowers to the old madam. I saw that this flower was not ordinary, so I took it and prepared to go see the old madam. Let her take a look." The purple-robed man's face lit up when he heard this. He said, "Bring that person to me." The green-robed servant looked at Li Jun hesitantly. Li Jun quickly said, "Didn't you hear what young Master Chi said? Go and invite that person over here." As he spoke, he asked the person behind him to carefully take the camellia. "Young Master Chi, why don't we go to the tea house over there and sit for a while?" he asked. Chapter 1945. After Zhang Zhenxing handed the flowers to the Li residence's servant, he quietly waited for the person inside to summon him. He was very confident that the things he presented would be able to please the old madam of the Li residence. However, wasn't the speed a little too fast? Zhang Zhenxing was a little puzzled as he looked at the Li residence's servant who was so polite to him. When they met for the first time, although there was no problem with the other party's etiquette, when he spoke, the hidden arrogance between the lines was clearly seen by him. Although Zhang Zhenxing didn't understand what was there to be proud of as a servant who wasn't even free, he still had a respectful attitude on the surface. Zhang Zhenxing felt that something unexpected must have happened. Otherwise, there was no way to explain the strong change in the servant's attitude. He was directly brought to a pavilion. Zhang Zhenxing stood quietly with his head down and didn't look around. "This 18 scholar and these pots of roses were all planted by you?" A young male voice came from above. Zhang Zhenxing heard the voice and raised his head. The moment he saw the person sitting opposite him, his face froze for a moment. Zhang Zhenxing had never seen such a noble person, whether it was a man or a woman. He had only heard that the Li family was a big family that had been around for generations. Could it be that this was the background of an aristocratic family? He stopped his wild thoughts and said with a neither humble nor arrogant attitude, "This commoner sold these flowers. They were planted by this commoner's daughter." The purple-robed man didn't know why, but when he heard this, his heart suddenly beat quickly. He wanted to see the person who planted these pots of flowers. However, on the surface, he just said lightly, "I like the flowers you planted very much." Zhang Zhenxing couldn't figure out who this person was, but looking at him, he definitely wasn't a nobody. He could only bow to show his gratitude. After young Master Chi said this, he didn't say anything. Seeing this, Li Jun asked Zhang Zhenxing, "I heard that you came to offer this pot of flowers to my grandmother. Is that true?" Zhang Zhenxing was stunned and realized that this was the young master of the Li family. He hurriedly said, "Yes, this commoner wants to come to Yun County to do a small flower business. It just so happens that my family has the best 18 scholar flower. I heard that the old lady of the Li family in Yun County loves this flower the most. This commoner thinks that such an elegant flower would be like a cow chewing on a peony in my hands. I might as well give it to someone who truly understands flowers. How could Li Jun not understand the hidden meaning in his words? He just wanted to win this pot of flower in exchange for the Li family's protection. He was more interested in something else. You speak in such a logical manner. Are you a scholar? Zhang Zhenxing shook his head and smiled bitterly. I only went to private school for a few years when I was young. I don't have any scholarly achievements. How can I be considered a scholar? Li Jun smiled. I think you are much smarter than many scholars. He had a good impression of Zhang Zhenxing, so he immediately ordered people to bring flowers and bring him to see the old mistress. Grandmother would definitely like it. As for this merchant, it would depend on how lucky he was. The purple-robed man casually glanced at the 18-scholar tree. No one could see the trace of pity in his eyes. Zhang Genxing's trip was quite successful. When old Mistress Li saw the camellia, she was very happy. She even had someone wrap a red envelope for him. The county magistrate was also very happy to receive the orchid. In short, if he wanted to open a flower shop in Yun County, there probably wouldn't be any blind people who would come looking for trouble. Chapter 1946. He returned to the town in a good mood. However, he did not know that someone was secretly following him. Gu Xingyin was at home. When she heard the noise outside, she was happy for a moment. Then, she suddenly became cold. Jiujio. Zhang Zhenxing opened the door and saw his daughter's smiling face. Gu Xingyin said, "From the looks of it, father, things must have gone very smoothly today." Zhang Zhenxing nodded. Old Madam Li and the county magistrate were very satisfied with the gifts you sent. I think we won't be bullied in Yun County. Gu Xingyin smiled and nodded. Zhang Zhenxing looked at his daughter's yard, which was full of flowers and plants. A satisfied smile appeared on his face. My Jiujio has learned a great skill. You are much better than me. He said, Father, I have thought about it. I will take out all my savings over the years and buy a shop in Yun County. If this flower shop is done well, it will make more money than our family's clothing shop. However, my Jiujio will have to work a lot harder. Zhang Zhenxing said with a little heartache. He originally thought that he would pamper and protect his only precious daughter. When his daughter grew up, he would choose a good husband for her. After all, Jiujio would not have to worry about food or clothing for the rest of her life. He did not expect that he would still have to work hard to take care of the flowers and plants. Gu Xingyin shook her head. I only water them and move them a little every day. There are not many of them, so it is not tiring. She was telling the truth. The flowers she raised would not even give birth to insects, let alone die. It was really convenient. Zhang Zhenxing wanted to say something, but Gu Xingyin said to him, Father, you have worked hard today. Go and rest early. If there is anything else, we can talk about it tomorrow. Zhang Zhenxing smiled helplessly, but his heart was very warm. He went back to his room. After her father went back to his room, Gu Xingyin closed the door to her yard. She turned and walked into her room. Unexpectedly, she bumped into a wall of people. Gu Xingyin was speechless. She quickly took a step back and covered her forehead as she stared at the person in front of her. The man in the purple robe was handsome, and he was sizing her up with a burning gaze. For you. Gu Xingyin put down her hand that was covering her forehead. The purple-robed man saw that there was a red patch on her fair forehead. What a delicate girl, he thought to himself. He answered her question subconsciously, My name is Qi Qingxian. Qi Qingxian? Instantly, the system transmitted the relevant information into Gu Xingyin's mind. She frowned and looked at him. I don't care who you are. What are you trying to do by trespassing on private property at this time? Qi Qingxian raised his eyebrows and looked at her. You don't seem to be surprised that I suddenly appeared in your yard, nor are you afraid of me. As he spoke, the tip of his nose took a deep breath without leaving a trace. The light and elegant fragrance entered his body along with his breath. His restless heart seemed to have been gently comforted by a gentle hand and miraculously calmed down. This feeling was really good. His entire temperament softened at this moment. Gu Xingyin looked at him and suddenly said, "Do you have a fever in your body?" Qi Qingshuan's eyes turned cold, and he stared at Gu Xingyin sharply. "For you." She was not surprised or afraid to see him, and she could see the hidden disease in his body at a glance. She could even plant the flower that could relieve his fever. How could such a woman be the daughter of an ordinary businessman? Chapter 7. I don't know why, but recently, I can only get to Chapter 7 at 10 o'clock. Every night I get stuck. This is simply terrible. See you later. I will slowly draw the next chapter card. Chapter 1947. Gu Xingyin met his cold eyes, but her expression did not change at all. As you can see, I'm just an ordinary merchant's daughter. I know how to grow flowers and know a little bit about the art of Qi Huang, Gu Xingyin said lightly. However, in the next moment, she found that the man who was 3 steps away from her had already come to her. Her chin was pinched by the man and lifted up. She was forced to look straight at Qi Qingshuan. Qi Qingshuan's initial irritation was suddenly stunned when he met Gu Xingyin's clear eyes. The uncontrollable flames that were rising up seemed to have been poured down by something clear. Before they could erupt, the tiny spark was mercilessly extinguished. He seemed to have thought of something and suddenly lowered his head. Gu Xingyin's breath stopped. The man's breath intruded into her territory domineeringly, with his exclusive scorching heat and no mercy. Compared to her nervousness, Qi Qingshuan's expression could be said to be one of enjoyment. He lowered his head at her neck, but he did not really touch her skin. Such an action, if seen by an outsider who did not know, would probably think that this was a young couple with deep friendship. Gu Xingyin suddenly reacted. Her face blushed and she was about to push him away. Qi Qingshuan obediently took a step back and left her side. Gu Xingyin glanced at him coldly. When she was about to say something, the man spoke first. "Before I was born, my mother was poisoned." Gu Xingyin's eyelids trembled. The words that she was about to blurt out were forcibly swallowed back. She quietly listened to the man speak. When Qi Qingshuan spoke of this, his face was emotionless, as if he was not talking about himself. Although it was discovered in time, she still hurt her body. Later, when she gave birth to me, she did not make it and passed away. As for me, although I survived, I carried the heat poison from my mother's womb. Gu Xingyin looked up at him. Qi Qingshuan said, "I've never let anyone know about this except for the doctors we've been honoring in our family. Now, can you tell me how you know about this?" Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes and said softly, "Of course I can tell." These words sounded very perfunctory, but it made Qi Qingshuan laugh. There are so many doctors in the world, including the imperial doctors in the palace, who couldn't diagnose the illness, but you can see it at a glance. Qi Qingshuan is impressed. As he said this, he suddenly looked expectantly at Gu Xingyin. "Then, can I hope that Miss can cure my fever?" Gu Xingyin did not answer. Instead, she asked, "Why are you so confident in me?" Qi Qingshuan smiled and said, "It's probably because you have a special aura. As long as I get close to you, the heat poison that has been raging in my body will retreat." It wasn't just her. Even the flowers she raised more or less carried that kind of feeling. This was also the reason why he was so excited when he saw the pink rose. Gu Xingyin took 2 steps back, sat down and poured herself a cup of tea. "I can cure you," she said frankly. Then, under the man's bright eyes, she said slowly, "But why should I save you?" 8th update. A new announcement. Starting from the early morning of the 23rd of this month and ending at 24 o'clock on the 7th of May next month, there will be a double monthly ticket promotion on the website. Well, it means to cast a monthly ticket, which is equivalent to 2 tickets. If you have a monthly ticket, please remember to vote for Gao Lingji. Tomorrow, after the early morning, double. Please, ticket. Chapter 1948. Qi Qingshuan was stunned for a moment. He was really surprised by Gu Xingyin's words. Because of his identity, he had never met anyone who said no to him since he was a child. When he was a child, his father doted on him. When he grew up, he inherited his father's title. Even the high and mighty emperor treated him as his own son. It could be said that even the crown prince had to be courteous to his cousin. Therefore, he really didn't expect that a flower girl in such a remote county would reject him so easily. But what surprised Qi Qingxian the most was not this. He was more surprised that when he heard such a blatant rejection and saw that she didn't take him seriously, the first thing that came to his mind was not anger. Instead, it was natural. In his heart, he subconsciously thought that the girl in front of him was the normal one. Qi Qingxian couldn't help but take a step back with his hand on his forehead. He thought to himself that not only did he have a fever, but also his brain. Gu Shengyin saw him take a step back with his hand on his forehead. Her heart tightened and she blurted out, "What's wrong with you?" As soon as she finished speaking, she met Qi Qingshuan's surprised eyes. Then he laughed, "You are worried about me." Gu Shengyin was silent. Qi Qingxian only felt that his heart was inexplicably opened. He said with a smile, "You just asked me why you wanted to save me. So, now you have the answer, right?" Although he asked in a questioning tone, his expression showed that he was sure. Gu Shengyin sighed in her heart and nodded on the surface, "Of course." She met Qi Qingshuan's happy eyes and said lightly, "Although I promised to save you, I also need to get a reward." There was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. Qi Qingxian certainly knew this very well. He asked, "What do you want?" Gu Shengyin thought for a moment and asked, "How long will you stay in Yun County?" If it was someone else who asked about his schedule so openly, Qi Qingxian would have long suspected his motives. However, when he heard Gu Shengyin's question, he did not hesitate at all. "We will depart in about 5 days." Gu Shengyin nodded. "Then come here in 4 days. I'll tell you what I want." Qi Qingxian responded. Looking at Gu Shengyin, who was holding a cup of tea, he asked curiously, "Aren't you curious about my identity?" If he remembered correctly, he had never exposed his identity, right? Wasn't she afraid that she had met a swindler? Gu Shengyin smiled. "Is there another noble named Qi Qingxian in the capital?" Qi Qingxian took a deep look at Gu Shengyin. If he were in the capital, he wouldn't be surprised if others recognized him when he announced his name. However, in this remote Yun County, it was strange that a merchant girl, who looked like she had never left this small town, knew his identity. He didn't say anything. His figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't delay and went directly to her father's courtyard. "What did you say?" Zhang Gensheng's eyes widened. He never thought that his daughter would give him such a big surprise, just as he was thinking of ways to open the door to Yun County. The capital. It was a place he never thought he could go in his life. Chapter 1949. After Zhang Gensheng heard his daughter's words, he was still hesitant. He asked worriedly, "Jiujiu, there are so many famous doctors and imperial physicians in the capital, but none of them can cure the prince's illness. Can you really cure him?" Gu Shengyin was very confident in her heart, but in front of her father, she had to pretend that she wasn't very confident. "Father, I'm not completely sure. It's just what you think." Since he has already said it, do I have any leeway to refuse? Zhang Gensheng wasn't stupid. He naturally knew that in this world, one couldn't do as they wished because of their low status. Gu Shengyin saw that he was worried and comforted him, "But you can rest assured. The prince said that the flowers I planted can alleviate his illness. It should be useful. Otherwise, he wouldn't have personally come to find me. What's more, he said that even if he can't cure him, he won't let us go." Zhang Gensheng's expression became a little better. However, he immediately reacted, "I just returned home. When did they come to find you?" He nervously looked up and down at Gu Shengyin. "Jiujiu, are you okay?" Gu Shengyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'm fine. I'm fine." After a while, she finally spoke of her plan. "You see, we will definitely follow that prince to the capital. He also agreed that as a reward he will give us a shop. Father, this is a great opportunity." Zhang Zhenxing was very moved when he heard this. The capital, the foot of the emperor, was the most prosperous place in the great Ming dynasty. It was naturally a place that all merchants yearned for. However, not to mention how precious the shops in the capital were, just in that luxurious place, any random guest they met would be a descendant of a noble. For small merchants like them with no background, even if they had money, it would be difficult for them to move an inch. But now, someone had given them an opportunity. A shop, a powerful backer, and his daughter's top-notch craftsmanship. Zhang Zhenxing said, "This isn't a small matter. Father needs to think about it carefully." Gu Xingyin said considerately, "Take your time. That prince won't leave until 5 days later." Looking at Zhang Zhenxing's expression, she was already 70% confident. Sure enough, early the next morning, Gu Xingyin had just woken up and had not eaten when Zhang Zhenxing hurried over. "Jiao, what do you think we should do with your brother? Our family's shop here." He talked about a lot of worries. Elder brother? Gu Xingyin thought of Zhang Fei, who had yet to return from his home. Of course, she couldn't leave this hidden danger behind. She said to Zhang Zhenxing, "After that prince learned of our family situation, he gave us a special favor and sent people to find out why my brother went missing." This kind of thing was impossible for the Zhang family, but for Qi Qingxian, it was just an order to the secret guards. Zhang Zhenxing was stunned when he heard this. In the end, he was still a little reluctant. After all these years, he had long regarded Zhang Fei as his own son. But when he thought about what his daughter had said and what Zhang Fei had done, he closed his eyes and said with a forced smile, "That's good too. If Fei has relatives in this world, they should be reunited." As for the shop, the father and daughter thought about it for the whole morning and finally made a decision. Zhang Fei was still far away at this time. He had no idea what was waiting for him when he returned. Chapter 1950. 4 days later, an inconspicuous green carriage arrived at the Zhang family's courtyard. Although the carriage didn't look very conspicuous, it still attracted the attention of the townspeople. In this small town, even an ox cart was rarely seen, let alone a carriage. Someone asked Zhang Zhenxing curiously, but Zhang Zhenxing only smiled and said that he was going to visit his relatives. He didn't mention the real reason. This was also Qi Qingshuan's request. After all, treating him was considered a secret. When they arrived at the capital, it was best to hide from the public. It was best not to expose their whereabouts. Zhang Zhenxing's shop was privately handed over to a worker who had been with him for many years to manage. He brought Gu Xingyin and a distant uncle with him. The three of them left the town in a low-key manner. The carriage arrived at Yun County. It mingled with Qi Qingshuan's team and headed to the capital. As for Zhang Fei, Zhang Zhenxing was still a little worried. Will that prince really find Fei's biological parents? Gu Xingyin lifted the curtain of the carriage with one hand and looked at the scenery outside while answering, "Don't worry." That night, when they were resting at an inn, Qi Qingxian came by himself. "My subordinates have found your brother's family." Qi Qingshuan's tone was a little strange. Gu Xingyin didn't respond, but Zhang Zhenxing asked hurriedly, "How is it? What's the attitude of the family? Where's Fei?" Qi Qingshuan's gaze swept over Gu Xingyin. Then he slowly told her the news that his subordinates had just sent back. It turned out that Zhang Fei's background wasn't simple. He was originally the legitimate son of an aristocratic family in Yunzhou. He was taken away by a kidnapper when the servant brought him out to see the lanterns. After that, he was bought by Zhang Zhenxing. The family really hopes to find their long-lost child. Your son, himself, is also very willing to reunite with his family. Qi Qingxian tried to summarize the final result as briefly as possible. What he didn't say was that Zhang Fei's biological father's first wife had passed away long ago. After remarrying, he gave birth to 2 more sons. He didn't miss his eldest son, who had been wandering outside since he was young. It was only when they heard that his subordinates were from King Ping's residence that their attitude changed drastically. They were very enthusiastic about bringing their son, who was related to King Ping, back to the clan. As for Zhang Fei, who Zhang Zhenxing was concerned about, When he found out that he was actually the young master of a large family, he was wild with joy. He didn't even bother to go home to see his adoptive father and directly wanted to go home to fulfill his filial piety. Thinking of this, Qi Qingxian sneered in his heart. What was there to show filial piety to a relative who he had not seen for many years and could not even remember what she looked like? Zhang Fei's reaction was undoubtedly that he wanted to quickly return home and become a disciple of an aristocratic family. At this moment, how could he still remember the Zhang family that had raised him for more than 10 years? Qi Qingxian did not miss out on Zhang Fei's reaction. He told the father and daughter of the Zhang family word for word. Gu Shengyin did not react to this. Wasn't it to be expected? He had long known that Zhang Fei was an ingrate. Zhang Zhenxing, on the other hand, was suddenly stunned. After a long time, he sighed and said, "Probably, it's really because this child is not fated to be with our Zhang family. Since he has found his family, then from now on, he has nothing to do with the Zhang family." Gu Shengyin comforted him softly, "Father, I've always been here." Chapter 1951. Qi Qingxian didn't care about this kind of thing. But today, he said something rare. "In my opinion, for someone like your son, it's better to draw a line early." The secret guard in his hands had clearly said that ever since Zhang Fei had agreed to return home, he had only been excitedly asking about how his family was doing. He had not mentioned the Zhang father and daughter at all. Such a person was selfish to the extreme. Zhang Zhenxing said in a low voice, "Thank you for your advice, Your Highness." Qi Qingxian nodded and turned to leave. Gu Shengyin stayed by her father's side the whole time. She could tell that her father really cared about Zhang Fei, which was why she felt uncomfortable at this moment. Zhang Zhenxing came back to his senses and met his daughter's worried eyes. He smiled, "Don't worry too much. Your father's heart isn't that weak. Although I feel a little sad at most, I'm just disappointed in your brother." He was indeed disappointed because of Zhang Fei's coldness. But after thinking about it, Zhang Zhenxing was glad that this happened. It allowed him to see Zhang Fei's true colors clearly. He would just take it that he had raised an idle person for the past 10 years. He was very glad that he didn't betroth his daughter to Zhang Fei. Otherwise, with Zhang Fei's character, he didn't know what kind of life Jiujio would have in the future. Is this the capital? Zhang Zhenxing lifted the curtain and looked out of the carriage. He felt that there were people coming and going. As far as the eye could see, there was no place that wasn't bustling, no place that wasn't glorious. At this time, the silent man driving the carriage spoke, "Master Zhang, Mr. Zhang. Our master has returned to the manor first. How about I send you directly to the courtyard where you live?" This man was Qi Qingshuan's subordinate. The father and daughter had no objections. Then, the carriage stopped in a quiet alley. Zhang Zhenxing was stunned as soon as he entered the courtyard. He thought that the prince had just casually prepared a residence for them. But now, it seemed that it was much better than casually. His eyes swept across the spacious courtyard, the carved doors and windows, and the elegant and exquisite furnishings in the room. He couldn't help but take a few deep breaths. "Little brother, there's really no need for us father and daughter to live in such a big courtyard." He tried to communicate with the man driving the carriage. The big man replied respectfully, "You are too polite. These are all the master's arrangements. You can rest assured and stay here." Zhang Zhenxing stopped talking. He had taken advantage of others, not to mention such an exquisite courtyard. At this moment, his heart was already in his throat. He couldn't help but think that if Jiujio couldn't cure that prince's illness, would he fly into a rage out of humiliation? However, Gu Shengyin's attitude was very natural. She asked, "Are you following us on your master's orders?" The big man said in a low voice, "Master said that while the two of you are in the capital, I will follow the two of you and wait for your orders." "That's it." Gu Shengyin looked at Zhang Zhenxing, who was still worried. She sighed and said, "Dad, I remember. Why don't you go and see if there's anything broken on the way here? We'll move it directly to the shop later." Zhang Gensheng's attention was suddenly diverted. Hearing this, he quickly got up. "Yes, I have to go and see." This was something to settle down and settle down. He couldn't be careless. After watching Zhang Zhenxing walk away, Gu Shengyin asked, "Did your master say when he will come?" Chapter 1952. As Qi Qingshuan's confidant, the man naturally knew that the young girl in front of him was the guest that His Highness ordered to take care of. When he faced Gu Shengyin, there was a layer of respect in his voice. "Miss, as subordinates, we don't know about Master's schedule." He continued, "Master said that he will come to you when the time comes." Gu Shengyin nodded, "All right then." The man continued, "You must be tired from the journey these days. Have a good rest today. Tomorrow, I'll take you to see the shop." Gu Shengyin nodded. Then, the man clapped his hands, and a few people came out of the yard. One of them was a pretty maid in her teens, and the other was a middle-aged woman with a smile on her face. "My name is Tsaiha," said the pretty maid. "My name is Ing Yang," said the middle-aged woman. "These two have always been in this yard. In the future, they will follow Miss Zhang. If Miss Zhang needs anything, just tell us." Gu Shengyin didn't expect them to be so considerate. She nodded and smiled at the two of them. The man continued, "My name is Qi Chao. I'll be responsible for Miss Zhang and Mr. Zhang's safety in the future." By the time they got familiar with everything, it was already yellow in the west. Ing Yang was the cook in this mansion. Her cooking skills were top-notch. After dinner, they went to bed early. The next day, Gu Shengyin sat in the carriage and came to the shop that Qi Qingxian had prepared. She looked at the beautifully decorated shop and the surrounding environment. She was very satisfied. Sure enough, Qi Qingxian did put in a lot of effort. However, Zhang Zhenxing was a little uneasy. He thought that it would be good enough if His Highness could find them a random shop. He didn't expect that it would be in such a good location, and the shop front was really spacious. He was a kind person. He always felt that Zhang family had taken a lot of benefits from His Highness without doing anything. Moreover, he was more worried that if his daughter couldn't cure His Highness's health, these things were really too much for him to accept. On the contrary, Gu Shengyin didn't think so much. She turned to look at Qi Chao. "I'll have to trouble you to bring all the things we brought here." Qi Chao grinned and waved his hand. "It's no trouble." He was good at martial arts. In less than 15 minutes, they had filled the entire room with all the things that Gu Shengyin and the others had brought over. Qi Chao took out a special token from his waist, and then gently hung it at a certain place at the gate. Zhang Genshing's puzzled him. He explained, "This is our mansion's property. His Highness is taking care of this business, or in other words, His Highness of's care of's, lest some ignorant people come here trouble. Of Gu Shengofim understood that day, Zhang Zhenxing and Gu Shengyin stayed in the shop together. However, Gu Shengyin only stayed in the inner room. Zhang Zhenxing was the one who greeted the customers outside. After a day, when Zhang Zhenxing returned to the courtyard, his eyes were wandering. A pot of roses sold for 5 taels of silver. More than 10 pots were sold today. Other than roses, there were other flowers. Almost half of the flowers in the shop were sold today. Zhang Zhenxing calculated the profit. In just one day, he had earned a year's worth of silver. Chapter 1953. Even though he had mentally prepared himself, his eyes were still a little dazed after the calculation. It was indeed the capital. Gu Shengyin face-bombed. She said, "Dad, this batch of flowers can be treated as a discount for the opening of the store. In the future, we will go down the path of cherishing flowers." This was what Gu Shengyin had thought about a long time ago. Since she had such a golden finger, it would be a waste to raise those ordinary flowers. In the future, she would focus on raising those precious species that were not easy to raise. If she raised those flowers well, a pot of them would be worth hundreds of pots of ordinary flowers. Most importantly, she would die of exhaustion if she kept ordinary flowers at such a consumption rate. Zhang Zhenxing also came to his senses. He agreed with his daughter's idea. Firstly, he felt sorry for his daughter's tiredness. Secondly, he had seen the generosity of the people in the capital. It was simply a huge market. Let's give the flower shop a name. He suddenly thought of this. Gu Xingyin smiled. I have already thought about it. Flower King Pavilion. This. Zhang Zhenxing was a little hesitant. Isn't it a little too arrogant? Gu Xingyin smiled. That's exactly what we want. We have the ability to do so. She had thought about it a long time ago. The shop mainly sold rare flowers. Her goal was to sell rare flowers in the entire Ming dynasty within a year. The first thing that came to everyone's mind was Flower King Pavilion. If it was an ordinary person, they would not dare to make such a promise. However, she had the spiritual spring in her hands. It was really difficult to raise any plants that could not be raised. Seeing his daughter like this, Zhang Zhenxing also felt a rare sense of pride in his heart. But Flower King Pavilion it is. Dad believes in Jiujio. After closing the shop and returning to the courtyard, Gu Xingyin realized that a guest had already arrived. What do you think of the shop? Qi Qingxian asked. Gu Xingyin nodded. Thank you, Your Highness King Ping. Qi Qingxian frowned. For the first time, he felt that the title he had been called for more than 20 years sounded so harsh. However, he did not say anything and just drank his tea quietly. Zhang Zhenxing could tell that he had something to say to his daughter. He found an excuse to return to his room. Miss Zhang, when can you treat me? Qi Qingxian asked. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and said, wait for me here for a while. Soon she came out with a cup of hot tea. Qi Qingxian took it over. There was a blooming rose on the surface of the tea. Flower tea? He was stunned. Gu Xingyin gestured for him to drink it. Qi Qingxian knew that he should be careful. But for some reason, he was certain that the woman in front of him wouldn't harm him. Therefore, in front of Gu Xingyin, he did not hesitate to drink the cup of hot tea one mouthful after another. Aren't you afraid that I'll poison you? Gu Xingyin teased. Qi Qingxian said seriously, I'm not afraid. Gu Xingyin was surprised. Qi Qingxian said, my heart tells me that you won't hurt me. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and did not say anything. Qi Qingxian only felt that as the cup of flower tea entered his stomach, there seemed to be a cool feeling starting from his stomach and slowly swimming to his limbs and bones. The irritable feeling in his body seemed to disappear without a trace under this cooling sensation. He closed his eyes comfortably. He took a long breath and asked curiously, what's the secret in this flower tea? Gu Xingyin glanced at him and replied, even if I tell you, you won't understand. Qi Qingxian, 6 chapters. I feel like my soul is out of my body when I'm writing tonight. I can't take it anymore. I'll update 6 chapters today and make up for it tomorrow. Today, my monthly votes have exceeded 1,000. Thank you for your votes. I have nothing to repay you with but my body. Please don't be careless and continue to hit me. Monthly votes. Good night. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.